This one's muted, so I don't come through myself. Sometimes I like to do a bit of pre-roll thing here because it's that manufactured authenticity thing. It's like, yeah, we're just real people.
Yeah, pick your nose. It's all good.
That's get right in there. Good afternoon or evening. Welcome to Drawing Now. I think it's episode 4. We're talking about duets. My name is Sydney Ekeris. I am the featured artist of the RPG community. Joining me today is one of the hypest people that I know, and certainly one of the hypest people in the RPG world. She's an absolute brain when it comes to game design. She is the author of the reality dating show RPG Final Girl, A Game of Love, the editor of the upcoming Jane Austen RPG Good Society, and when I'm having my best days, she's my friend. Please welcome the Sunny to my Cher, the Thelma to my Louise, and the old Kanye West to my new Kanye West. It's Lauren McManaman.
Oh, thanks. Oh gosh, I should say things about stuff that I do, right? That's the protocol.
Yeah, you can give us some context on who you are.
Yeah, well, I on top of the editing for The Veil and Good Society, I also do the monthly editing for the Gauntlet Codex, which is always fun, filled with good community projects, full of talented people and all that jazz. And also currently designing Girl Underground, which is a very Alice in Wonderland, labyrinthy-esque inspired game about following this girl's wonderful adventures through this crazy fairyland with her trusted companions. And this is a surprise. I know. And then finally, speaking of duets, I also am designing a game with Kyle Thompson called Strange Birds. That's a 2-player game that he and I wrote very recently, inspired by all of New Zealand's fucking weird dumb birds that shouldn't exist, but I'm real proud of them because they're so dumb. So that was the catalyst for that game. I don't know when that's coming out, but we've written a draft for it, and it's amazing. It's the game, much like New Zealand Birds, is real dumb but sweet and cute, and it's yeah.
Shotgun.
Yeah, exactly. The Kakapo is the beta inspo for that game.
Oh my god,
that's what I'm doing.
Amazing. I can't wait for that. That's going to change the world. I'm so glad.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped.
All right.
So thanks, Kyle.
That is such a good start. Oh god, I can't wait to. I just want this chat to be about Strange Birds now. Sorry, more?
Oh yeah, well, if I don't know if Australian Netflix has this, but we watched this really stupid documentary called it was Beacon Brain, and it was I'd call it Satanism if I didn't know it had been done with sincerity, because it pitched this the Kakapo against a crow in New Caledonia for which is the smartest? Is it the dumb Kiwi bird with a beak, or is it the smart crow of New Caledonia? And it's just, if you have access to Beacon Brain, I recommend that documentary because it is silly. But anyway, sorry, we're not.
I've just added it to my list, so that's on my Netflix list now. I'm so
perfect.
Glad.
Yeah, but so that's me plus all of the dumb shit that I've been watching. Sorry, can I swear on your podcast?
Yeah, I do. That's fine.
Okay.
I'm sure that our audience of 6 people, nationwide or worldwide, are really going to be. Boy, they'll have to take their kids off. We'll go down to 4 people.
Well, and then on top of that, thank you for talking to me whilst I'm in transit and staying at a place with Sydney levels of internet. It's a delightful nostalgic renaissance to my time when I was living in Australia.
The image behind you of the bed, the mirror, and then 2 lamps is the most hotel picture I've ever seen.
It really is. Yeah, bed's unmade. I couldn't be fucked this morning. So yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Oh my god, this is so good. So I got to put things out on Twitter, and I have some questions of my own. I guess for context, I'm doing this cowboy outlaw lovers sort of Bonnie and Clyde but cowboys game at the moment. And one thing I found is that designing a game for 2 PCs is turning out to be very different for designing a game for Ensemble Cast. So I really want to talk about that, and I want to start by talking about kind of what we started using this term duet RPG, and that includes both games with GMs and without, but basically with 2 protagonists, 2 PCs. And I think Haley really hit the best opening question, which is what is it that makes a game good for 2 people as opposed to a game that's good for a lot of people but shrunk down?
Oh, that is like a very interesting question. I think it really depends upon the experience you're after. Having like sampled, sorry, I apologize in advance to Kyle because like he's done most of my experimentation with like duet RPGs, ones that were designed for 2 players and ones that weren't. So I played like duet RPGs that from games that were designed for like an ensemble cast, and ones that were like designed specifically for 2 players. And yeah, like I think what's made it good for me anyway is like the opportunity to really drill down into some good like character development following like one PC through like a story. I feel like it's a PC and a GM. And I guess if it's like a 2 PC kind of like GM-less sort of game, I guess like that relationship. So like being able to focus on like sort of the microtransactions between like either this player and the world, or like this player, like their relationship with the other PC. That's what I like super enjoy about it. Yeah, I can't speak for like other people and what else they want from like the experience, but I think that's what makes it good for me. It's like, yeah, being able to. I'm a touchy feely like sad robots kind of gal. So like that's what I look for in games, whether they're sort of duets or ensemble.
Okay, so it's the ability to sort of narrow that spotlight and to really get down on it. So do you find a functional difference between the games that you've played that are built for that? And so I guess for examples, I always like to kind of give some people some hooks. So I know Monster Hearts 2 is one of the non-duet games that you've played in that way. What are some others that you've played, especially ones that were designed to be played in this way?
Oh, like games designed specifically for like two people?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I played like Dead Friend. Oh, sorry, Dead Friend. I had the opportunity to like play test Philip's game Alone in the Wilds. What else have I played that was 2-player? Trying to think. I feel like I'm blanking. I think that's actually the only 2 that I played that were designed for 2 players. And then in terms of like, sorry.
I was just going to backfill. So, Dead Friend being Lucian Kahn's game about summoning, like necromancy, summoning your old friend or whatever, and
yeah, when he's dead, when he's alive. Yeah. It's really sad. Oh, and I played The Bite too.
Correct.
Yeah.
The Bite being Ben someone's zombie game about being 2 people trapped in an environment, and yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. One of you might be like a zombie, one of you might not. Do you shoot the other person at the end of the half hour you're playing?
So what is it about those games that are built for that they provided that you didn't find when you were playing your ensemble games shrunk down?
Oh, interesting. Because I think one interesting thing is the games that I've played designed just for 2 people are pretty much all one-shots. So it's like sit down with a friend for half an hour to like Dead Friend. I could play for many hours. And then like you're done at the end of the piece. Whereas the other ones that I've played as 2 players for ensemble casts were like short campaigns. So I haven't actually seen I personally haven't played any 2-player games that are designed for like a short to mid to long-term campaign.
Okay, interesting. And that's not yeah, that's not a weakness in the design. That's just they weren't built for that. I see. Because I'm with you.
Yeah.
You can play the bite for years if you wanted to. It's got a lot of depth to it, but it does always come down to that decision moment.
Yeah,
Really
and with Dead Friend, it's like you come to a point where it's like, okay, you've summoned this person, like, what's the epilogue, like, what's the outcome of this game?
That's really
Yeah.
interesting. Really interesting. Do you think that do you think that games that are designed for two people should be designed with a shorter play length in mind because of the sort of increased focus time or the increased load? Like you never get to really switch your brain off in a duet game.
I think like it's less a load thing and more of like a natural story progression kind of thing because I was talking to Kyle about this. Yeah, exactly. You get so much done because like I had a short-term campaign of like Urban Shadows with Kyle, and we played for I think it was like 6 sessions, and we got like a whole like 12 sessions worth of like character development in there because it's this one PC driving every single scene. So yes, in the sense that they end up being short because at some point you're like, I think the story's done. like we could keep playing this, but to what narrative purpose would we be like exploring the story further?
Do you think that reduces some of the impact of it? I've got friends that are like playing their year-long D&D campaigns and stuff, and part of the impact they get is that it takes up so much physical real-world time. Do you think that it reduces the impact by getting it done in a smaller block?
No, because oh shit, like 2-player games are like they're shorter, but they're so like the intensity is like increased tenfold within that short campaign space. It's not that like you're telling a shorter, like shallower story across like 6 or so sessions. It's like you still have 12 sessions worth of angst and like for me sadness and like drama and relationship feels, but it's just like way condensed.
Interesting. 12 sessions worth of angst is the name of your production company for
pretty much. Yeah.
So that intimacy is really interesting. Let's talk about that. These games can be that intensity, but I guess that comes along with intimacy. These games can be more intense due to the nature of only playing with one other person, especially in jamless games. So the question, as asked in those words by V Hendro at Rocket TV on Twitter, how do you break that ice? How do you initially say to someone, especially in games? So you and I are both PBTA players quite a lot, and games such as The Bite and Dead Friend outside of the PBTA space carry over that like really accelerated drama. Like we want to get right into the good bits, into the squishy bits. How do you break the ice with someone so that when you're yelling feelings at each other 2 minutes later, it's comfortable?
Oh, that is like such a good question because I have like I give a shout out to like Brian and Jesse, who I both like adore and like feel very comfortable with like in an intimate space, like exploring these relationships. I think both times I played with them for the first time were duet games, and with Ryan it was Dead Friend and Jesse it was The Bite. And I was gonna say like have a really good like combo about lines and veils and stuff like that, but I don't know if we did. I think
safety goals.
Yeah. But like they're both lovely people, so like you know, not having that safety discussion like ended up being like a moot. But if I had to say like good processes for breaking the ice with someone, I think it kind of depends on the game. Like if it's like you said, Dead Friend or The Bite, and you're into like 150 million% feels like from the jump. like, yeah, have conversations about life fails. Like, don't do what I did, and practice like good safety tools. There are like, I think particularly for games where you're jumping straight into a lot of like really emotional intensity. I think like I played Philip's game. I think it's Alone to the Wilds. And I like the game a lot because the character generation is so iterative that you kind of get to have that discussion with your PC or GM depending upon like which role you're playing throughout character creation to like developing their backstory to like introducing them to the game so that you kind of like unfold like your comfort levels like certain subject matter and stuff like as you go throughout their process, which I really enjoy.
Emily Care Boss's Breaking the Ice does something really similar where you're talking at a great distance about the characters at first, and you kind of fall into the characters throughout that first third of play.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and I like that for like games that are specifically designed for two players. Sort of building in that structure to facilitate safe conversations between like the PC and the GM. Since like you might be like me and go like, fuck it, let's just like jump in straight to the fields. Which like can be good. I guess in theory it could also like not be such a productive experience, depending upon who you're playing with, I guess.
Do you think that safety tools get used differently in duet games?
That is a really good question. Yeah, I think, and again, this really depends upon like the subject matter that will come up in your two-player game. I think the way the safety tools have manifested differently is just more extensive upfront conversations about like what you want to see in play. And I think that comes down to you're so in character and so involved in the scenes you're playing out. Oh, I don't know. I guess like it's not that like I don't feel comfortable using safety tools, but you're so in the scene that like I guess like taking a step back and say like I'm gonna X-card this, like can we pause this? I guess like doesn't come to like to the forefront of my mind. I don't know if that's so true, but anyway, yeah. I think the biggest difference so far is this more upfront like conversations about like I want to see this, like I don't want that. How comfortable are we going with like the subject matter? Oh, and then actually, I think like way more use of script change and rules around like pausing. Let's like talk about this. Maybe like rewind that or fast forward this rather than X-card is like a binary. Like, oh, can we just chuck that out? Because, yeah.
So that's really interesting, and I can imagine a couple of reasons, but I'm interested. Why do you think script change is more effective in the duet than X-card is?
Yeah. I haven't thought extensively about it, but if I had to say, it's probably a factor of it just being two people. So having that conversation that doesn't feel like you're breaking the flow of the game for like other PCs, I suppose. And then on top of it, I think like I don't know. Yeah, it's probably to do with like the space factor. You just feel like you can take more time to like explore stuff or interrogate stuff or say like, okay, like I'm more comfortable with that. How about we rewind and do it that way instead? Or like you have more, like I guess like editorial authority over like the story that you're telling with someone else.
Yeah, editorial authority is a really good word for it. I was going to say that you have more ownership over it because the shares of the game are split between fewer people. But editorial authority is a really good way of putting it as well. Thoroughly interesting.
Hope so.
Oh, man. I get this every time. It was the worst, absolute worst of the Brewers. It happened with Effie. It happened with Phil. It happens with everyone. I get to this point where I'm like, I've got a list of things I want to talk about, but the things we're talking about are so good.
Oh, I'm glad.
You're absolutely amazing. Okay, I think I want to talk about pieces. I think I want to go down into some more like niche things of it, and then I want to come back out to the breadth of it again to sort of fill it out. So for the niche bit, history is something that's really bothering me at the moment.
Oh yeah.
Do you find, especially as I said before, the fact that we're really PBTA kind of people, how do you change history in games where there are only two protagonists? So in Urban Shadows, for example, it asks you to establish a bunch of debts with different players. Did you establish all of those debts, or did you just pick one for the other PC?
Ooh, okay, there's a lot to unpack there. What do you mean by change history? Like in the past, or like?
No, so sorry. So history as a tool of Powered by the Apocalypse games to establish connections between players using a not even necessarily a resource management system, but using a questions presented about things that happened prior to the story occurring.
Yeah, interesting. So like, I think Urban Jet is like a really good example, but also a really bad example. It's a bad example because I chose the Hunter, which is all about the debts and obligations you can't pay back. And so like Carl and I going into it, where Carl was like, "Look, oh yeah, that's so many thoughts." So like, okay, taking a step back, before you even get to the history part of it, for games like Urban Shadows, the playbook you pick 1,000,000% dictates like the nature of your relationships and like the flow of the story. Because like he and I had a really, because he and I had a really long chat about okay, which playbook do you want? Because I was like really tossing up the oh shit, what is it? Not the Infernal, the one that
The
is
Tainted?
the Tainted, and he was like, it was like okay, well the Tainted is all about like sort of like dom and sub like themes that I think you want to explore, and I was like, oh, yeah, that'd be interesting, like maybe like I was looking at the Hunter, and he was like, okay, well the Hunter's all about like the debts and obligations you can't give back to people. So like if you're interested in exploring someone who is very dedicated to a cause but super can't deliver on anything, like that's a playbook to pick. So like I think there was a third one too. I forget exactly what it was. But for sure, like picking a playbook and this kind of, I think particularly PBTA game that's not designed for two people has a huge impact on like the history you develop for that character and also how their narrative unfolds like in your story. And then having said that, the the way we developed a history for this character was we pretty much had a super formal / informal chat about like, okay, what was your high school like? Who are your parents? Do you have siblings? Like, what class did you grow up in? Did you get kicked out of high school? How, like, and like really teased out about 4 to 5 key relationships for that character that took like an hour and a half. Like, it was a super long like analysis of every stage of that character's life to get like to this point in which they are now a hunter hunting people in the city.
And that's super interesting. So that reminds me a lot of Night Witches, the way that like questions are asked in the of characters in the formalizing part of Night Witches there. When you did you play characters that had connections with each other prior to your game beginning, prior to the first session?
So was that like deaths and relationships prior to the first session?
Not necessarily debts and relationships, like not necessarily mechanized stuff, but did you play characters that had knowledge and interactions with each other prior to the first session?
Yeah, for sure. I think that was key to making the world feel real from the first session.
Yeah.
Like for this character in particular, I'm not sure if this is like a productive conversation, but like we'd established that like my character had I think she'd hooked up with like this other girl in her high school who was like in a relationship already, and they hadn't super spoken since then because like my character had gotten kicked out of high. It was like suspended from school pretty much. Real like rebel kid who was then sent off to, as you do when you're a teenager, I guess, go and become like a dragon hunter with your estranged uncle in
Of course, that's
like
what we
the ass
do.
end of Vancouver.
Mhm.
And yeah, so like, and I think I can't speak for my lovely GM, but I think like just having those sort of relationships with 3 or 4 hooks about their nature, like I think we established like I hadn't really spoken to my sister much since high school either,
Mhm.
and was now at odds with my uncle as well or something. But anyway, like just establishing like sort of 4 to 5 key NPC relationships with like some hooks for Kyle to go like, oh, okay, I can like make Lauren owe a fucking million debts this way by
Right.
bringing in these NPCs. Yeah.
Interesting. And when you played, oh, sorry, go.
Oh, I was gonna say like PS apologies to Kyle if I misrepresent what happened to the game.
I got to give Carl a chance to chat with me sometime too and get back at you.
Please.
So when you played Monster Hearts, did you play? Did you have someone in a GM role and someone in a PC role, or did you both play PCs and share?
Yeah, and that one I GM'd that game, and had a PC. Yeah, one PC.
And you had one PC as well as a GM.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So I want to talk about Classroom and how you approach that. Did you use the standard Classroom start?
Kind of. I sort of adapted it from Jason Cordova's like genius approach for intimate Monster Hearts games, which is to deploy like the detention classroom size,
Yeah.
where you just like cut most of the seats and it's just a small classroom.
Great. This goes
Yeah.
really into what I'm after, which is
Okay.
how big was your classroom size there?
I think there were 9 seats and we only filled like 6.
Okay.
But then, like for reference, this was also a Monster Hearts game themed after Final Fantasy VIII, where
Such fucking nerds.
I know. Where like if you've played FF8, like the class size is real small anyway because you're a coterie of like 5 people who go on missions as like child soldiers. Yeah.
Just picking the mood up with some child soldiers. So PC NPC triangles are a big part of creating connections between characters. When you have so few PCs though, there's a problem that I've heard called the Skywalker problem, which is in Star Wars, it's this massive galaxy and yet everyone is related to each other. Right? And so the idea is, fated farm boy hero from the moisture farms is related to galactic princess who just happened to meet each other, and it's this big like coincidence factory just pumping out related characters, and that's something I want to avoid. And so I'm wondering, when you have so few PCs, if you're creating those sorts of triangles. Now, Monster Hearts is a really interesting situation because teenagers will generate their own triangles by design. But with things like Urban Shadows, when you want to create a larger, more sprawling world, do you find that having so many people connected to a single individual can make it feel a bit small town, or a bit like a coincidence factory?
Oh, Let me think. Oh Jesus, sorry. I think annoyingly yes and no for
Yeah, great,
um
great.
for different games, right? And I think so. I mean, Monster Hearts and Urban Shadows are good comparisons because there's a lot of overlap in terms of somebody my internet being a dick.
Sorry? No, no, your
Yes.
internet's good. Your
Oh,
internet's
but
good.
I think my internet. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah. There.
oh,
Uh, no, Urban Shadows and Monster Hearts are great comparisons, I think, because there's a lot of overlaps in terms of like playbook themes. And I guess like the angst is kind of same but different. One's just teenagers and one's kind of adults, I guess.
yeah.
In Monster Heart, sorry, in Urban Shadows, I think because there's these faction structures and each NPC is tied to a faction. I can't speak for Kyle, but as a PC, it felt like you were a player or a pawn getting wrapped up into the machinations of like faction warfare because that's kind of how the game is structured.
Right. So that's really effective for a small volume of PCs because when you've got the big ensemble cast, it can feel like you're kind of almost your own faction.
Yeah, and like one player game of Urban Shadows, it becomes more of like what I term the Night Witch's delightful drama-ness, which is like you go to one you go to one like in KPD versus like the rest of the Red Army, right? It's like you go to one faction for help, and they're like, "Yeah, I'll help you," but you've got to fuck over like the power faction,
Yeah.
and so like, you're the power faction. They're like, "Oh, I wish I could help you out, but you gotta go fuck over that person." So it becomes you just become like the go-between for like all of these different factions.
This is really interesting.
Like, oh, good. Compare that to Monster Hearts, where like I think our game was a bit different because we created a character to be Luke Skywalker, who was she was like the Renoa, right? Like she was the teenager who was going to become the next sorceress. So everything revolved around that character. But because everything felt, I feel like because everything was so personal and it was all about interpersonal relationships, the NPCs had to really like define who they were in relation to the world off of that PC. So there was less of like the power structure of factions to support your NPCs. Your NPCs are like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a horny teenager who like has lots of feelings and stuff. And yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a horny teenager. Is the name
Yeah.
of my RPG production company. That's really cool. That's really cool. So when you have one character, so the PBTA style of character generation and playbook is designed for ensemble cast. Do you find that that playbook selection for an individual character for a single PC or one of two PCs can be too limiting?
Not in my experience. It just means that that's like the only theme you play. And like I think that's like I feel like that's well for me anyway, I find like PBTA is like super good genre emulation and often in playbooks have like certain themes baked into them. So it's like when you pick your playbook, you're gonna be like 150 million% interested in that theme because it's like literally gonna be the only theme you explore for that story. So
You're right.
it's not limiting, it's just very like focused.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, that's really interesting. Really interesting. And then because you're hitting that theme so hard and because you're so focused, so normally, okay, there are two different emotional arcs that occur in a game. There is the character's emotional arc and there's the player's emotional arc. And what we can kind of do sometimes to keep the intensity for the character but give the player relief is we can cut to a different character. Right? So you're being interrogated by the NKVD and they're up in their chest poking you and they're like, we're going to execute you if you don't spy on this person for us. And then we go, okay, you as a player, this is a lot for you. maybe you're going to have to make a decision in a second. So we're going to cut, and we're going to cut to something different. We're going to give you as the player that breathing room, but we can keep our thumbs on that character. We can keep pressing on that character. How do you think that changes when your spotlight is so much smaller and you can't, or how does that change how, or can you cut away in that way and give player relief?
Yeah, I come at this from sort of two thoughts. I mean, the first is you really can't cut away unless like you do a complete like scene cut, or as players to GM say like, okay, like that scene's wrap it up. Let's like move to a different scene. But before I go down that tangent, I think that's, at least from my experience, that feeling of intensity from this is like quite an intense scene between like the NKVD and this PC is mediated by how much support you get from the rules. The moves. Because there's a difference between saying, okay, like I'm gonna do a thing which will trigger a move, which will to some extent like dictate an outcome and which I can tailor my character's behavior to. So like
Right.
I don't know, say if you go to, I guess like Lash Out's kind of a bad example because it's in Monster Hearts, and it's one thing I'm going to talk about. But so again, say if you lash out at someone, it's like, I'm going to punch you, and it's like out of 10 plus, you kind of get to punch the shit out of them, and it's cool. And a 7 to 9, there's like some mixed result and a miss, like, it's going to go poorly, which kind of dictates how like you as a PC behaves, but then also how the environment reacts to you.
Yes.
And for Monster Hearts, as an example, there's not a lot of moves that you can rely upon to navigate social situations like that. Like you can kind of turn someone on, you can run away, or you can like hit them.
None of which give you as a character any control over the outcome.
Yeah, so it's like, say if you're having a really like intimate or like a vulnerable scene where your character in Monster Hearts is like, hey, I think I love you. It's like there's no move to like dictate how your environment's going to react to that. So it makes it feel a lot more intense because as a GM or a PC, you can either say like, oh, I love you too, or like as a GM, your GM moves are like, no, they can't fucking be happy. So like, if you make a GM move, it's going to be like, I can't love you back, or I'm sorry, I don't love you back. And it's like, because there's no move to create a buffer or distance between you as like the MC and the PC, the intensity is like real raw in the front.
There's no metaphor.
Yeah. I think having a move buffer at least like relieve some of that, like, not responsibility, but some of like I guess it does, like it relieves some of that responsibility of like, well, the dice today should act in this way, so I will do that. Whereas, if you have someone coming to you saying like, I love you, it's like, oh, fuck. Well, like my GM moves say I can't make you happy. So I'm going to say like, oh, sorry. I don't love you.
That's every answer to every Tinder message I've ever sent. Sorry, my GM moves say I can't make you happy.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay, so let's talk about those mechanics then, which is that is there a difference in this is shamelessly stolen from Reese McMillan at Reese Makes Swords on Twitter. This is, I think, my favorite question so far. Is there a difference in how much the game system needs to be engaged? Do mechanics have to pull more weight to make up for having less players, or do the mechanics fade in the background because two people are more intimately collaborating?
Yeah, I read that question. I was like, that's a good question.
I know, right?
So good. I'm gonna be annoying and say like, if I don't think this structure can ever like fade into the background. I think that's largely because like, I think I sort of like learned this from you, which is when you're playing a game, you kind of have to think about like the game structure, the GM facilitating it, and like the PCs. And so if you remove, so I think like depending upon the type of 2-player game you're playing, if it's like a GM PC game, like you're losing less of that pillar structure. If it's a GM-less PC game and you lose that GM pillar, it's like, oh fuck, like you really feel that loss of someone else to like facilitate some of that load between system, GM, and PC. And I think we like, and sorry, Kyle, is my example for everything. We were like, let's play Fall of Magic. It's a GM-less game. That'll be super easy for 2 players. And like, oh fuck, that was like I felt like I'd worked out. Like I was like, yeah.
Fall of Magic asks a lot of players. Doing it as 2 players is, I commend you.
Because this and like it makes like Fall of Magic is great. You know, I love it. It's like great for high fantasy bullshit wankery. But there's no like there's just no system support for how you like navigate outcomes or like resolve conflict. It's all just like, well, I point my sword at the guy and he says, are you gonna kill me? And then I say, no, I'm not gonna kill you. So like it's just real, like it's real rough, like trying to like manage the conflict in a narrative when you don't have a structure. So I guess like long story short, like yeah, it really helps having for PC games with no GM, like having that structure there to like really facilitate the 2-player experience. And I think that's what I've noticed the most in playing games specifically for 2 players is like the insane amount of system game support for facilitating that engagement. Like Dead Friend is like a very ritualized, like then you do this and you draw these cards and you narrate an experience from like a time where your friend betrayed you. And the Bite, likewise, you draw cards with prompts and you like talk about a really sad time when you like shared a dinner over candle lights before like the zombie apocalypse.
The Bite is very LARPy, which gives it a lot of support there because it's played out chronologically with like in a single space of time. There's much less inserting other characters or inserting other scenes. It's like, okay, you and I are sitting across from a table from each other. Our characters are sitting across the table from each other. We have a gun in the middle. They have a gun in the middle. It's very LARPy.
Yeah, totally.
Oh God, Lauren, I've LARPed. You've got to kill me now. Stop me.
Why are you so ashamed about laughs?
I don't know. It's like the last bastion of RPG nerdery that I haven't delved into.
Oh well, I enjoy that. I've laughed and I love it. So
didn't you do like Midsummer Night's Dream laugh?
Yeah, it was amazing.
You're my fave.
Had a Sydney Fringe. It was great.
By the way, Kyle in the chat did support you as well. Kyle was saying that Fall of Magic was really hard mode. He felt the same thing, and that's really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the things I'm thinking of doing is that so Wanted at the moment, which is its really bad interim name, is 2 PCs, a GM, but it's very much about there's parts of it that are very much about the PCs interacting with each other, parts of it about them interacting with the world to give them that sort of breathing room from each other. And I'm thinking that I'm going to pretty much have to have different move design between PC into NPC and PC into PC collaborate. Like I'm going to have to almost like structure it as different phases and ritualism, as you were saying, with like give the PCs a lot of structure, give the players a lot of structure upon which to build their decision making and their questions and their prompting and stuff.
Yeah. And I think that sounds right for... Sorry, I had like a brain tangent that I shouldn't go down.
Oh, no, that sounds so good.
Well, I mean, I guess my big question is like, are you envisioning this as like being a like short-term campaign thing or one shot? Because that's really going to change.
Short-term campaign. So I'm big on humane exit points. I'm big on characters having a way out. It's Bonnie and Clyde themed, right? So there's going to be 2 options to the end of it. Either you ride off into the sunset together or you die in a fiery shootout together. And the die in a fiery shootout together bit is kind of like marks. It's kind of like, oh man, this is going really bad. Like we kind of need to wrap this up, and this feels like the only way we can do it. And the riding off into the sunset is kind of like an end of session move. Like at the end of any session, you can kind of decide that this is it, and that you together have a happy ending.
Yeah, I endorse. I think played at various like ending scenarios of short-term campaign two-player games. Yeah, that's the right call to make because
I'm looking at about 4 sessions.
Yeah,
it's very much designed for the play that we do in Gauntlet. So like I think 4 sessions is perfect.
Yeah, that sounds about right for like a 2-player like short-term campaign experience. And I think it's clever having those outs because I know in one of our games, like it hit a point where we were like, we should epilogue here because if we keep going, it's gonna get real sad. So yeah, I think having those like exit points for having agency over how you envision this epilogue or story ending is like really clever without like forcing's a rough word, but like forcing your players to sort of go to the bitter end of like, oh, this game is going to go real sad. And
yeah, the snowball will always end in a sad space, so you need a way to bust out.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, which is, and so I want to talk about that, like, that sadness thing. So Blake was asking on Twitter, his original question was, is there a danger of too many positive moments or too many negative moments? And if so, how do you stay on track without losing agency? But I think as I kind of spoke to him and broke out what he meant by positive and negative there, I think that the question was kind of like, is there a danger with how much can turn on a single move in a PBTA game, or how much can turn on a single prompt in Fall of Magic? Is there a danger of losing that like emotional arc and everything just becoming sad forever? Or everything just being easy and easy and there being kind of no risk or no conflict?
Oh yeah, so that question from Blake, and I was like, "Look, that's a good question." So thanks, Blake. I'm trying to think about how to answer this. Again, I feel like a lot of these answers are going to be like, "It depends on the game you're playing."
Yeah, like, yes, but no. But that's great. I think that's what intentionality is definitely a big part of these, and so I think the question is like, how do you design for one versus designing for the other?
Yeah, and I think like from my experiences, it's never been like a point where it's like, no, it's a real sad game forever. And
weren't you just saying like, that there was a game where you needed to epilogue out because it was going to get real sad forever?
Yeah, I mean, I could give you 3 guesses to pick which one that was, and the first one.
It's all of them.
But no, this is a really good. I mean, I'm sorry, Kyle, but he and I adore the guy. Like funny enough, I feel like it's because like we played so many 2-player games. Like, oh yeah, like Kyle and I did the thing, and I feel like I'm still talking about it. It's like, Kyle, I apologize. Slash, why isn't he here? But sorry, tangent. But he and I are actually like planning on playing another 2-player game coming up. We're planning on playing Scum and Villainy, and he raised a really good point, which is, do we get rid of trauma? Because trauma really drives your character in a particular direction, whether they're like obsessed with a certain thing or they get like real hard and mean or they get like soft, and it's like that becomes such a defining trait for your character that going into it we were both like, well, that's going to be like the story. Like if you start traumaing out and you start getting on these like traits, like you become obsessed and then you become like hard, and it's like, is that a character you want to play out? Yeah, so long story short, we decided to scrap trauma, and he, because he's wonderful, wrote a custom move for like clearing trauma. Yeah, like when you stress out, like clearing trauma in a 2-player game. which is the right call to make, because I think when you start layering on like like trauma in particular, you're sure as shit gonna get a real sad game, because like the trauma's not happy for a reason. But
yeah.
yeah.
And Scum and Villainy, like Blades in the Dark, is one of those games that doesn't have happy exit points. Like the first like 20 coin or whatever it is, 20 stash for Blades in the Dark, the exit point is like you are awash in vice or something like that. Like it's really brutal.
Yeah, and actually, I think he pointed out too. It's like that trauma. How do I say this? I apologize. I misquote. Oh, God damn it! Why isn't Kyle here?
He's
but
in
like,
he's on a train in the middle of Tokyo. He's going to the Vale.
But I think we had a chat about like how some of the trauma doesn't feel like genre appropriate for Scum and Villainy, and like if some of it isn't genre appropriate for Scum and Villainy, like that's gonna just be exacerbated in a 2-player game. So again, there's like nothing else to focus on.
Scum and Villainy. I love Strauss. I love Scum and Villainy. I love so much about it.
I'm so pumped.
Scum and Villainy is a game that can be a lot of things. It's the same problem that there is in Blade, same problem there is in OSR and Trad and stuff, which is that it's not even a problem. You need to be real clear about whether you're playing Firefly or Killjoys when you go into it. Like, because if someone wants to play the happy-go-lucky Space Cowboys game and someone wants to play the like dark loss of family game, there's different things going on there.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I think to Blake's question, it's like okay, so like I don't know. I don't feel that there's ever a risk of like having too much levity or too much sadness, because again, I think it comes back to like editorial authority, where if you have some super sad stuff, you as like players or EC to GM can talk out like let's have a scene with your sister that's a bit less sad. Like you can like it feels like
less sad.
I mean, that I didn't say that. Like I love sad things. But yeah, like it feels almost like you're more directing the movie of like this game, because you can make those like editorial choices to say like, let's have a scene about this. We can skip over these days because like nothing exciting happens. Let's like cut to a scene of that. So it's like you can kind of like, if you're going for a game that's a mix of like levity and sadness, you can pace it out. Is that sure? I mean, Monster Hearts is the exception, because no, you can't be happy in Monster Hearts.
And that's a really, really good point, is that different
games do different shit.
Different mechanic sets do different shit. And so, and this is the issue that I'm approaching it from, because I'm the person that's trying to write the mechanic set, is like, it's a pretty, if you played Monster Hearts and you played it by the rules, and I mean like without hard scene framing, and you played it very much to what it wants to do for an ensemble cast, your individual PC would just be getting like shit on 24/7. Like it would go so bad.
Yeah.
You really have to approach the game from a different perspective when you're running it for
Yeah.
that character.
Totes. I think I ended up like, I read the GM moves and I was like, I am not doing any of this, because the GM. I mean, I played a month of Monster Hearts at that point. Like I love Monster Hearts, but because the GM moves are like, put them in an before I misquote severely, like
leap to the worst possible conclusion, expose dangerous secret,
exactly. So like I think like
I think there's an old Groucho Marx quote, which is I feel I'm definitely misattributing it, but it's like tragedy is when I stub my toe, comedy is when you fall in a sewer and die. And the idea is like that individual distance. And so when you've got an ensemble cast, exposing a secret to the wrong person, exposing yours, Lauren, your character, Tiny the werewolf exposing their secret to the wrong person gives me as a player a moment of levity. But if you're the only PC and I'm just exposing your dangerous secrets over and over again, like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm
So I mean,
strings on you, and I'm yeah.
yeah. So I think this game in particular, like I kind of ended up being more like monster. I don't know, like I ended up like going against some of the reactions just to introduce moments of like either intimacy or levity or like kind good feels because
Right.
yeah, just with one PC and a bunch of NPCs who have it out for them is a really like emotionally intense burden to put upon anyone, really, I guess.
So here's a question for you. Do you think there's value? Because I think that's awesome. I think that is such a valuable bit of at the table design that you've brought up there. Do you think there's value in doing a small game like this in saying like, so I mentioned before that there's two different types of moves. There's PC into NPC and then there's PC to PC moves. Do you think it's valuable to be like, okay, these moves give you this resource but generate this tension, and then these other moves relieve that tension but cost maybe that resource or something. So it's like the players will kind of seek those moments of levity and intimacy and also seek those moments of like conflict on their own. Or do you think that's really a GM trait of being able to look at the emotional scope of the game and say this is where it needs to go now?
Yeah, I've not thought of that one. Just trying to think of the games I've played. Well, see, the interesting thing. Sorry, I feel like I'm going on like many different side tangents.
Good. That's what this is all about.
But the interesting, so I guess like your game is a little bit different because it sounds like it's GM-less. Like you have to worry less about like having a facilitator to like direct the flow of.
I think it'll be GM'd, but I think that I'm using it as a crutch. But I also don't want it to be GM-less. I don't know. I haven't decided. It needs playtest.
Yeah, well, so this is my interesting like 2 cents of playing a really emotionally intense game as a facilitator. Is like there was a point where I had to like nope out of a scene because I was like, this is too sad. So like, oh yeah, sorry, I'm all over the place. But interestingly, in that game of Monster Hearts, I ended up playing all of the NPCs as I would PCs. Like I ascribed them a playbook. We triggered their like sex moves appropriately to get some like I guess like mutual exchange of benefits across like characters. And maybe for that reason, I don't know, it was so intense playing like 4 to 5 Monster Hearts
PCs, because you've got to constantly care about stuff and watch it be destroyed. That's like the core loop of Monster Hearts. Do you like this? It's broken.
Well, I think it was this. I don't know how to say it. Like I was just so aware of like the like. I'm so sorry, Kyle. I felt like I had like tiny baby.
Welcome to the fuck pile hour. It's no. I'd like to.
I was sorry. I was so conscious of the fact that I have this like pure like PC soul in my hands, and like I have so much responsibility to like.
Which playbook was this?
Wait, yeah, it makes sense. Like Kyle was playing the Serpentine.
All right, yeah, that's a pretty good one to get. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was like one part of it was like I felt like I was playing 4 PCs to 1 PC.
You absolutely are with the Serpentine, yeah.
And then and in that sense it was like it kind of was like a PC NPC be a PC NPC PC triangles because I was playing PCs.
Yeah.
But to that end as well, like one thing that I wasn't prepared for was just like the amount of I don't know, yeah, like self-care and like I had to put into GMing that game as well, just because I don't know. I guess like maybe this is like bad of me, but like uh it's easy to think of like a GM as like an environment that doesn't have a stake in what's happening.
Yeah.
And that might be true. I feel like that's truer when I've GM'd like ensemble casts where you feel a bit more removed and you can sort of like Night Witch is a good example because that's always in my heart. But you can sort of like take a step back and look at, okay, well, if I poke this character that way, they'll do that. It'll throw them in the direction of like that other PC, and this NPC is like a good, yeah, like point to that triangle. Whereas like in a 2-player game, you're so deep in it. I don't know how to explain it. That I've like lost my train of thought.
No. So that I've been talking with Haley and V because boy, do all my good ideas come out of talking with Haley and V about distance and about metaphor and stuff like that. And I think that what you're talking about there with the GM is that by having that distance from the story, you get this very macro look, this very big picture look, where you can kind of dance puppets and drive that where you want to go. But when you are investing in individuals as a GM and when you're running them as PCs, your face is so much closer to the road that like you can't take that step back, or it's more difficult to take that step back.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. For sure.
And I think that's why I want this game GM'd, because I do want someone to be able to take the step back and be like, this needs conflict, I can generate that.
Yeah.
Versus, the kind of like pair looking out for each other, I guess. Interesting.
Yeah.
And Kyle was saying your Monster Hearts game had basically zero distance.
I'm sorry, Kyle.
I've heard wonderful things from HB about it. I don't think it's been a problem.
Oh, good. I had read it. This is like not connected to anything, but it sounds sorry. I've been working on trains too long today. No, I think like the nice thing about having a short-term campaign for 2 players, so you've got a GM and a PC, is you give your GM breathing space to like go away and like do their clocks or like come up with bits to inject like between sessions, which is I think it's a good way to get a bit of like potentially a good way to get a bit of distance from that kind of thing, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's really important. I'm just thinking about how the problem with this chat is I'm constantly projecting it forward and being like, oh, so how am I going to design? How am I going to? And I don't know. But it's okay because there's whiskey, so everything will be fine. We'll make it work. Okay, I think we're at an hour, so I want to do one more, and then I want us to talk shit and just like roll around for a bit and stuff like that. This one's the reason I'm bringing this one up is because it's really close to my heart and really important. There's an old thing about the world ending at the PC's horizon in PBTA games about like how stuff only matters when it's influencing the PCs, and we kind of build the world through the PCs. So if you have a Skinner, then you need someone who patronizes their arts, and if you have a Serpentine, then you build a family for them, and that family has a legacy, right? But if that PC was a werewolf, then there wouldn't be a family legacy because that's not what the story's about. With less PCs, when you're only creating like one player character, and I think you might have gone into this when you were saying you were giving NPCs playbooks. With less PCs, there's less of this world building in character generation. There's less of like, especially in Urban Shadows. Urban Shadows is a game that builds all of these intricate debts and interconnections by your playbook choices and by the debts that you choose. With less of that, with only one PC or only 2 PCs, how do you make a world feel big?
Yeah. And if we can use the case study of Urban Shadows, Yeah, well, I think that's partially why it's like poor Kyle and I did like a good, I think it was like 2.5, 3 hours like session zero stuff. So like the time you'd put into like a ensemble cast session zero stuff we put into our 2-player game to build up like just the history of this character and where they got, as I said. I think that did a lot to shape the world and paint in its edges before play kicked off, which I found really helpful because I think otherwise we would have got into that game and it would have felt a bit like, I don't know, like you're in the dark and you can't really see much in front of you. Like, as you said, like your character into the horizon. But I think because we did so much extensive discussion about like what this place looks like, we sit it in like a cast it in Vancouver. So like there was like a literal world we could look at on like literally Google Maps to say, oh, you're living in this area, like, you know, your friends live in that area. So like that helped too. I think like doing the legwork and sitting it in like a real place to give it that depth it was very helpful. And again, I can't speak for dear Kyle, but I imagine that helped like layer on the faction relationships and like the turf warfare going on with the factions as well.
Okay, I look forward to Kyle's comment in chat in about 3 seconds about how true it is. So
I know, yeah.
So like,
Okay.
I think Apocalypse World gets away with a lot of like creation in character generation, stuff like that. Urban Shadows, from what I've heard and from what I've played, and I've played very, very little Urban Shadows. I need to play more. Please hook me in on that. It's a game that benefits from having like a map or a real city that you can hang things on.
And like Night Witches with your
Night Witches.
The
air base,
yeah.
what's called stations, not battle stations, something, I don't know. I'll pull it up. Kyle was saying that
Sorry.
fronts fucking adorable. Kyle was saying fronts and storms in
oh yeah, that was the other thing.
Urban Shadows really helped. Do you want to speak to that?
I was not privy to them, but no, Kyle said like having fronts and storms was like super helpful for I think like pacing out the game and all the shit that was going to happen like within our arc. So I think like from our discussions, and please Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, it helped him align like when all of the shit was going to go down with like where we were going to pace out this character's like exit point and where stuff was going to culminate. So if like he needed to put the accelerator pedal on to make the shit happen quicker, he could do that. And which we ended up needing to do. Yes.
Okay, cool. So I think there's something I can really do there from a design perspective about like creating a town or like a duty stations type thing, and then giving the GM a tool for fronts. I actually really want to use the term storms in mine as well, because it's like desert storms, you know, with like the thunder clouds rolling over the hill, and like you see them for miles, and then it's rain, and then it's thunder, and it's
seems very appropriate.
That's very much a thing from Swords of the Master as well. But boy, I somehow got a little bit drunk during all this. That's okay.
I'm sobering up now after red 2 beers. So I'm
not.
I can drink a lot more than that too. It's so embarrassing.
It is embarrassing, actually. I'm disappointed.
Oh, me too. Don't worry.
Cool. So the storms, the fronts, by Kyle's thing, gives a world beyond. Sorry, man. World beyond the PC. I super don't want to silence you. World beyond the PC's horizon of friends, which I think is super cool, and I like. And then, all right, I'll talk about that. Go ahead.
Yes, I mean, Kyle's like, I don't know, it's way more. Like, I feel the expert on this having GM'd a lot more than I did, but I think like the having that kind of support as a GM, I missed in a game like Monster Hearts, because I feel like I'm just ragging on Monster Hearts. I don't mean to. I love this game. Because that game's all about chaos and things like spiraling out to a point where everyone's like, I don't know, having really intense, sad feelings at each other, angry feelings at each other. And yeah, yeah, I think like in a game that had like very high feels, high intensity, it would have been good to have like some system support to like focus that along like some kind of narrative, give us some narrative beats, I guess, or like be able to create some marginal distance to plot the direction of my storm or whatever.
All right. Okay. That's so good. That's so good. Right. So I think some external creation, some fronts and storms, and really focusing on that narrowing of the spotlight, really leaning into that generated intimacy.
Yeah, go for gold on your themes.
Go for gold
all
on your
your
themes.
games going to be about.
That's a really good point. So, like one of my characters. So you and I played with Ryan a duet version of dogs in the vineyard, or the dogs PBTA thing, and you were both family members. And fuck, that's a good game. If anyone's watching this and really wants a good game, that's a great place to be.
It's really good, and Ryan's amazing, and I love Ryan.
I will say that doing a lot of this design, half of the time I think, what would Haley and V look like doing this game? And half the time I think, what would Lauren and Ryan look like playing this game? If you ever play with V, I'm just going to be like, I didn't plan for this. So,
yeah, you're fact.
So I think there's something about like have themes that you're willing to hit really hard and like be okay with the fact that, and I think as you said, that's why you need a smaller play length, because you're just hitting that theme again and again and again.
Yeah. I think it helps on both sides too. I think like as a player, you're like, I know what themes to like lean into, and as a GM, you're like, okay, I get what I need to do to like poke this playbook and bring out its worst.
Yeah. One of the other things I'm looking into is like having players have gaps. So imagine playing Monster Hearts and you're playing the Serpentine, and you have a very low, what's the stat for hitting people in the face?
Oh shit. Volatile.
So you have very low volatile, and so you're very much about maybe turning people on. You're very hot, but your cold and your volatile are pretty low. And then you're like, oh man, I just feel like I can't interact with these systems. Like I feel like it's too dangerous to interact with Lash Out physically, or too dangerous to interact with shutting people down. What do you think about that?
Oh, interesting. Because I don't think that's a problem specific to 2-player games. Because I've felt that too in like Monster Hearts Ensemble, where I'm like, well, I just can't hit anyone, so I guess I'm just gonna have to try and turn everyone on to solve my problems. I mean, to be fair, I'm turning everyone on anyway.
You are right now. I'm, in fact, let me pick my reaction. I get embarrassed and act awkward.
Oh, that's my reaction. My constant state of being. So
yeah, like, that's me.
Yeah.
You also get a string on me.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think more about it, just because I played Urban Shadows and have like the character perspective for playing that. Ooh. Oh, that's a really good question. I think when I approached it for me, like, this feeling as a player, it was that feeling of like, okay, I'm not going to engage this very well, so I am going to go into preparing for the worst. Like,
okay. So yeah. It's if you have a system that supports failure, like XP on failure, or just having interesting failure, you're like, you know what? Let's see how this goes. Cool.
Yeah, there were times where I made that conscious choice of like, well, I'm super shit at this, but like it's gonna create fun complications.
One of the things that I really like from the Dogs in the Vineyard PBTA that I made, that I've kind of want to bring into this, is that move of when you fail but you really don't want to fail, you can just pull a gun on someone and be like, nope, this is happening.
Yeah, which is like my least favorite move, right?
Well, like it's your least favorite move because of what it is about violence, and I'm totally with you on that. Like that was part of the treaties that it was doing, but in this one, like whether that's when you fail a move but you really don't want to reveal an embarrassing secret to someone or something like that, and then just re-roll it and get a success or something.
Oh. Oh man, it's a good. It's good for the thought because and is it too wanky to say like I mean yeah of course it's too wanky for me to say this but like I don't know for games where like failure is part of like the dramatic snowball or whatever as a player going into it it's like that's part and parcel of the game so failure is expected and you can kind of like fun with it and stuff. Whereas, like, I felt so fucking tense playing dogs because the stakes for failure are you have to like commit violence against someone, which as a player I felt really. I mean, we had chatted about that. Like, as a player, I wasn't sure how I was going to progress the game forward if I was
if you didn't want to interact with that system. Because you were like, I refuse to interact with violence as a system, which was so good.
Yeah.
Which by the way, like as Ryan's just saying in chat at the moment, the doing the thing that you need to do the right thing makes you a bad person is what Dogs in the Vineyard is all about.
Yeah.
And that's what the PBTA version of it was all about. So that part of it wouldn't be carried over. It would be something more like doing a thing that the player wants to sort of do.
Yeah. I feel like I did not answer your question at all. I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's talking about that. I think I'm taking so much good stuff out of this, which is great.
Oh, I'm glad. I feel like I'm just rambling, so I'm glad.
That's great. That's what I love about these. These are a big part of my not charm, but certainly my brand with this sort of parliamentary chat is like genuine stuff. Like it's you and I just hanging out and just talking about stuff that we care about.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah.
I like spending time with you, so it's all good.
Likewise.
So one of the yes, take another string on me. Another thing the big question that I want to ask is that I've kind of gotten through the bulk of my questions. We've just broken an hour and 10, I think. So my an hour and 20. My question to you is there anything that you, and I haven't seen any more questions from chat, so if they have anything to ask, they are fucking it away. Is there anything I haven't brought up about these duet games that you think is really core to their nature?
I feel like there always inevitably is, but then I'll only remember when I'm going to sleep. Like, shoot, I should have said that. I think like, I will say like the one thing that I really appreciate, and I think people are very aware of when purposefully designing two-player games, is not just a system that supports like game interactions, but one that supports safety tools. And
I feel that.
Yeah, and I've I think Philip's game is a good example of that because I can tell he's put a lot of thought into giving the player a lot of agency about the subject matter they bring up and how that subject matter is done to their character. So I can tell he's done a lot of thoughtful thinking about like how consent works into that sort of GM PC relationship. And so, as I said, the way character generation is done is very thoughtful in layering on both how that character, who that character is, and how they interact with their world, on top of like subject matter and content matter and stuff like in the initial worlds that compare that to games for like again, like Monster Hunter is a good example because the game is all about intense feels and it brings up a lot of uncomfortable subject matter. But I guess part and parcel of being an ensemble cast, like there is less intensified like challenge, I not challenges, but like there's less intensified stuff around like consent and like subject matter and like that lack of distance and like all that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Because
So,
that so Philip, like I will absolutely sing his praises. I was going to say that in a very Australian way that wasn't appropriate for YouTube publication. I will sing Philip's praises forever about the blackout mechanic of
yeah, yeah.
right? Which is very much considering from the start what happens when I want to keep intensity without violating player safety. And I want to make something like that, but I just have to get used to the fact that I will never design anything as wonderful as that in my entire life. Like, it's so perfect. It's super on theme. It does exactly what it needs to do. It cuts away from the scene, but it still allows like empty space for there to be bad things. It's so good.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, apart from the built-in safety tools of Apocalypse World style systems, which is in a lot of cases, the person who is being acted against gets to make the decisions as to what their consequences are. So, for example, as we've spoken about, turn someone on. The person who gets turned on gets to choose whether they give themselves to you, act embarrassed and awkward, or tell you what they think you want to hear or something, right? I don't think there's a lot of built-in safety tools in Monster Hearts. It definitely talks about it, and Avery, being who she is, talks a lot about safety tools and how that works. As there's that whole chapter about like keeping your heart safe, right?
Yes, definitely.
And talking about responsibilities, but all that sort of stuff is outside of the mechanizations of the game.
Yeah. So yeah, I 1,000,000% like appreciate having like that stuff in the book. But I think it is just a matter of the two-player game where you're not super distant from the subject matter. So sometimes like you might not be super aware of all the stuff that like comes with the like guidance on how to like do M stuff. Ergo, like just having safety tools built into your mechanics just takes a lot of that load off, I think.
Yeah, so I think I need a move in mind, like a move about like when you push them away, or like when you end the conversation, or something like that. Like a move about when you say no that gives the players that kind of blackout ability to stop the scene without stopping the story. Because we have a tool, we have a mechanic for stopping the story, and it's X cards, rewinds, and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tool. But what we need is my character comes to you and says, let's do one last job, and you as a player don't want to have that conversation right now, so you as a character, so you push that away, and there's a way for you to do that. Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, and another, this isn't a two-player game, but Bluebeard's Bride, I find, has a super genius way of building in safety tools like that with like I shiver and drop the ring.
Yes.
And sorry.
And that's really interesting fact. When I played Bluebeard's Bride, which I super agree with, when I played with it, I wanted to interact with that move. It was on the table, so we were playing over Hangouts, and I like exacerbated my body movements, and I said to Shane, I'm like, oh, I'm shivering right now, because I wanted to play with the system. So maybe there's something to like, if you give the game a safety tool, players will want to play with it.
Yeah, and I think that one too, like that, I find that's got a really neat like two-step safety process, whereby if you I forget exactly what move triggers it, but it's like if you go to do a thing, like say what you're afraid of, and if you fail, it's like a bit worse. So like in my mind, that's like in terms of PC dialogue to DM dialogue, the PC saying, I'm going to be a bit squicked out by this. And so the GM is like a good benchmark for what's going to squick out the PC.
Mm.
And they kind of have a bit of authority to like push that a bit further on a myth by saying, yeah, by pushing it. But the awesome thing about that is if the GM pushes it and it gets a bit too far, then the PC can be like, I shiver and drop the rig, which is like neat code for saying that's a bit too much. Like, let's back away from that line and someone else can take over.
There's a really similar thing in Swords Without Master in the perilous phase when you're like, the monster steps towards you and you have the dice in front of you and you don't pick them up. And then it's the monster picks up its sword and you don't pick up the dice. And then the monster thrusts its sword at you and you pick them up and you roll it and you're like, I deflect. And like, it's that same, I, through my nature of inaction, give you the authority to push me. And then when I want to assert myself, I have tools to do that, with which to do that.
Yeah, I will say the key difference there for me is active consent, right? Whereas in Bluebeard's Bride, I imagine this being the worst, and the GM saying, cool, I'm going to push that a bit further. Whereas in Swords, that's really like silent consent, right? Like I'm going to push you until you get to a point where you have to like say, stop, I'm not good with this.
Look, absolutely. At the micro level, absolutely it is at the micro level. There is a certain... man. Okay. We're also talking about two very different contexts because Bluebeard's Bride is a game about like abuse and assault and like some real dark shit. Swords Without Master is a game about high fantasy bullshit, right?
Yeah, so totally different context. But on that
you're
level,
not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. And it's a really good point because I think I do want active consent because I love the idea of players saying, like, I will, when I'm playing Swords Without Master, I will sit there and I will wave Pat at me and I'll be like, keep it coming, more.
Yeah.
Because I want to rise that.
Shoot, I had a point, but it's gone.
I also want to bring up that Bluebeard's Bride has Propose a Truth, which means that you get to do this really, really interesting thing. When you want to leave a room, you're just like, this thing is true, and then you get to fuck off. Like it's any player gets to choose when the room stops, which is so important.
Yeah, totally. Shoot, I had a thought, but that was like I was like, that's neat because like those two ways of like managing nopeness are similar, but I've totally blanked on what it was. It's fine. It'll either never come back or it'll come back and I'll be like, oh, stop. That thing's come back. So like, please.
No, please. That's so good. If any conversation was going to devolve into a discussion about consent, it was you and me, for sure.
Shit. God damn it! I know it must be like consent related because like every time we talk about consent, I'm like, it doesn't make my brain.
So yeah, I think that I want active consent for the most part. But there's also
shit. Sorry.
You got it? Did you get it? Yes.
Yeah. So the similarity I see in like Swords That Master and Bluebeard's Bride is like it's like iterative steps. It's not like a huge leap to do a thing. It's like I'm gonna push the envelope and then see how you feel, and if not, I'm gonna push a bit more. And I think like in my mind, that's where I sometimes bring back like 2-player games. So it's like I don't know, like being a good consensual partner by like checking in and having like just like constant check-ins with the other person to see if they're fine with where it's going. So that was the thought I had.
No, and so how do you think a game should I guess here's an interesting question. You are designing several games at the moment, but let's talk about the one that's probably closest in construction to my game because I'm selfish and my game is what I care about. Girl Underground. Does Girl Underground have active consent mechanics in it?
Good question. It is something Jesse and I talked about a lot in terms of less like I guess getting player consent on what this world looks like and how characters react and stuff. And we had that conversation mostly in relation to moves, because I guess no one knows, because like no one's played this game yet. But for
I've
very
played it.
lovely people.
I've played Go Underground.
But when we first wrote the moves for that game, so the playbook moves for companions are all questions. So like on a 7 to 9, ask this question of the world. On a 7 up, like ask this question of the world. On the 7 to 9, like it's going to be a bit mixed. Like so the question's going to be a little bit like uncomfortable or like awkward. And initially those questions were all put to that character.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we realized was some of those questions were dictating like either reactions or like from characters or the world
crossing the
without,
line. Yes.
potentially. So what we ended up doing was we just rewrote, we just put a little caveat before each of the questions. So it said, ask this character, da, 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 or like ask the GM, da, 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 or like get a player to tell you how they, da, da, da. So just like passing off like that authority to create like statements and facts about the world to the character that was most like relevant to / interested in, I guess.
I can tell when something gets really interesting, so I do the double nose touch instead of just a single one. That's like a really good marker that, like, yeah, I'm super trying to remember something. That's really interesting. Okay. All right.
Oh, and then I have to go. Sorry.
No, please. Please.
And I have to give a shout out to Good Society, because the way they navigate player consent in that game is freaking genius. So in Good Society, right, you have like resolve tokens that you can spend on other people to like compel them to do things. But when you propose that compulsion, it's put to like, I'll give you a resolve token if your character does X, or if X happens. Yep. And the response to that can be like, yeah, I totally do that. Or like, yes, but only if blah. Or like, no, I won't. So there's like a negotiation process for navigating where that fiction goes, which I think is super clever. And if like the other character says like, yes, I will do X, but only if the other player can be like, oh well, like I'm not on board with that, so I withdraw my resolve token, and the fiction continues as if I hadn't done that thing. So that negotiation process of that resource, I think, is like a very seamless way of like establishing player consent, like before the fiction can like, I guess, get to a point where it becomes a challenge.
Before it becomes truth. That's really interesting, because what else does that? The Archipelago, like try another way version of doing things is really good for that.
Yeah, I love playing consent. I love talking about consent. But
I love playing consent. Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh god damn, we should have a whole nother conversation about this.
Please talk about feminism and consent.
Let's do that. There was a great chat in Gauntlet RPG Gauntlet Slack about moves that are based around convincing people, and it was talking about that kind of thing, about the resolve token version of being like, I will do it if, one person gets to make the decision that it happens and the other person gets to set the stakes and that sort of stuff. And for me, that's actually quite easy, right? Because in Wanted, the convince move is an NPC move, and the GM really is happy to go along with whatever's most interesting for the characters or the story, right? But there's no PC to PC convince move to avoid that bullshit.
Yeah. I feel like that's quite common in some of the games I've played, where the convince move looks fine until you try to use it on the PC, and it's like, how do we negotiate this? I
love Alas for the Awful Sea, and I love Haley and V, and it will.
Of course.
Boy, am I gonna burn some bridges talking about this. Then Manipulate Another move falls apart when it comes to PCs, because it just feels so ineffectual. It's if they do it, they get +1, and if they don't, they act under pressure. And like neither of those are particularly like super engaging ways to resolve a convince move, as opposed to this is the NPC one where it's like they change the terms to suit themselves, or they demand concrete assurance, which is like a little bit more engaging, or a lot more engaging. This kind of like floating +1 is like the least. I've said it when I'm speaking to them, so I don't feel like I need to hold back. Floating +1s, I think personally, are the least interesting way to reward players.
Yeah. I think like I used to feel the same way about strings until I like, read the section on strings in Monster Hearts, where it's like if you give the string fictional weight, then I find it a bit meatier. But yeah, those moves where it's like you get a string or like a +1 or something, like often skip over like the interesting fictional meat.
The interesting fictional part, right? Yeah, no, spot on. And it is that like in Powered Up by the Apocalypse systems, convince is interesting not because of the impact, but not because of the outcome, but because of the obligation. So it's like the chopper one is always my favorite, which to praise them from here, Alas for the Awful Sea ports over really well in the Bosun, I think it is, has the move, which is like you tell people to do things and you either have to make an example of them, you'll hear about it later, or they like do it poorly. And that's an interesting way of doing it. But like giving that to PCs is not a functional way of doing it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was thinking my true love in life night, which is I think yes. I was like, I'm sure that which is like an interesting way to deal with it, but then I was just looking at the reference sheet and it's like, nope, it's very much the same. Like,
yeah. So Night Witches creates the obligation through the fact that you have to. Are we talking about reach out? Is that what we're talking about?
I was thinking of like reach out, act up, like anything where it's like I want to get my way, and it's like, do you do it like a woman, a Soviet Union pilot, or a hooligan?
So Night Witches doesn't have a convince move, right? Which is
it doesn't. Yeah.
So act up's interesting because the idea of you either get your way, which is if you do want to convince someone, if you do want to make someone do what they want, again, the move immediately falls apart when you have a PC because they can choose to do it or not. But if they don't, you're both marked, which is fucked.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially if you're like a Raven, right? And if you can move that mark around, then like who gives a shit?
And especially if the mark is like, if you're deep into the game and you're talking about marks that are like suffer the death of a comrade or something like that, and you're like just fucking killing people because you didn't want to go to the mess tent and get alcohol for me or something like that. Like it's
interesting how much leverage like that move has more leverage the closer you are to like through your story, because like retire your character. It's like they like if you could convince someone, like, I want you to go and pick up the trash. Like, nope, I refuse. Now you have to like retire. Like,
and so you and I both spoke about stuff like that's really low grade, like picking up trash and getting alcohol and stuff like that, which is low grade but has consequences and stuff. But the problem is that there's no limitations on this move. So if I'm trying to seduce your character and I'm like, oh, please come to bed with me, and I do it by acting like a lady and I roll plus guts, one of my options is make you do what I want. Like, how is that not the weirdest shit?
Interesting. Okay, I keep all the moves again. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
It's funny because, like, I mean, you know me. I love making out in a game, and like, but I've never used act up. I've never used act up to like try and seduce someone.
When you try to get your way, so I'm coming to you, and I'm using my lady wiles. I'm coming to you in eyeliner and lipstick, which is out of place in that sort of location, and so hopefully it'll make me look seductive and stuff like that. And I say, I want to make out with you, and I as a player, I want to roll the act up move because one of my options are to make you do what I want. And if you refuse, we're both marked. So if you refuse, you have to let's find a fun mark that you'll end up with.
Yeah, I've got so many thoughts with it, so I'll try and keep them concise.
Marks. you will witness the death of a comrade, being, or embrace your death and final destiny. Yeah, and that's like, that's so crazy. That's such a negative application of the move. Now, part of me says, designed for the bell curve, that's a shitty application of a move, and it shouldn't be concerning. But because you shouldn't plan for shitty people to do shitty moves. But
Yeah.
the other part of me says, yeah, that it's got to be designed with a bit of resiliency.
Yeah, totes. And I think I agree, like, this move doesn't have a lot of resiliency. But interestingly, where I've seen this move applied in a way that like squicks me out a bit, I think, is like the purpose the move. So it's like a real bad way of phrasing it. Let me rewind.
Please.
But so like, when I've seen people use this move, when I've seen people seduce someone to get what they want, it's usually through people seducing NPCs. And as far as I understand from Night Witches, that's like a little bit of what that move was designed to do, is to like sort of emulate the misogyny and sexism steeps like within the culture of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's still like face in our current culture as well. Who am I kidding?
Because we don't have misogynistic culture anymore. That's
and it's I don't know, like it's interesting watching players navigate that move who you can tell aren't super aware of what they're doing in terms of like replicating like misogynistic discourse. so sometimes you get players like rock on up and I'm like, yeah, I totally like put on the lipstick and I like flash my boobs a bit and I go up to this high ranking officer and I'm like, I want this thing, and this officer, because they're gross and disgusting, is like, oh yeah, I'll totally get what you want if you sleep with me. And they're like,
okay,
yeah, that's fine.
Like, that's fine. That's a good outcome, as they say.
And I've also seen this move, like people do the same, like the exact same thing, but like with that level of like I guess like understanding and appreciation for like what that move does and what you're doing with that move.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but it's just I can see what it was designed to do in terms of like putting into practice like this shitty misogynistic discourse, and it does it super well. But yeah, there's not a lot of like support safety structure to like see it affected in a way that like solicits PC consent, or I don't know, like healthy discourse.
Yeah. so that goes back to this core thing we're talking about, which is it different if it's with a PC versus an NPC? Is that different?
Yeah,
I think there is, but I'm also I'm a non-binary person who has up until very recently lived their life under the gorgeous power structures of masculinity. Like, I'm super aware that I might be coming at this from the wrong angle, where I think if it's an NPC, it's kind of okay because that's part of that empowering destructive nature of PCs. But you're about to tell me that I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong, but it's just like, well, it's interesting because when you said like, oh, it's different for PCs and NPCs, I immediately went to like, oh yeah, because like some GMs treat their NPCs like objects. And so like,
yes.
If your NPC is a woman and you're treating her like an object, then like that's
then helpful. Interestingly, is it different if we're talking about the NPC being the woman, being the low-ranking navigator woman versus the high-ranking like masculine gross officer dude?
Yeah, like 1,000,000%. Because like I always like I have never subscribed to the idea that like it's fiction, it doesn't count, because like the narratives and discourse that you like portray in games directly reflect like the social structures we have in our present day lives. And so by playing like a powerful male NPC in that situation, it's like, sure, it's definitely different than,
sure, it counts. Yeah.
Like they're yeah, you can't sort of separate like the realities of like misogyny from the fictions of misogyny that we retell, because they directly impact each other and vice versa. Whether that's like your plays at the table and your GM at the table, and like reinforcing like particular discourses about how women are and should be, or and just putting a story out to like the world, like say on Hangouts where the people are going to watch, because like we're recording this, like we're creating media for people to consume, and they'll consume it in particular ways and stuff. So I think like there's always like flow on ripple effects for the stuff you talk about in games.
Interesting. I also think this is something that we came to playing the Dogs in the Vineyard hack that we did with it's very different when you're coming like punching up versus punching down, right? When you're seducing the man in power versus when you are leveraging a weak lower ranking female officer, like that's a power structure problem. Which is why Dogs in the Vineyard falls apart, because you always come in as people who have power, and you are always enforcing that power on minorities, always, all the time, forever,
all the time.
Fuck that game.
Yeah, it's also
which is interesting, because I want the characters from Wanted to be powerful characters who are enabled to do what they want. But the reason that they're enabled to do what they want is because they're acting outside of the law, so they are inherently like oppressed, hunted characters, but they also have a lot of power within their context, because they're like, because they're willing to go outside the law, because they're willing to, be criminals. They have some power. It's weird.
Yeah, that's a real different. It's a real unique axis to have like like plays or characters like exist on, for sure.
Yeah, it's like you, when you walk into the mayor's office, the corrupt mayor of the Western town, which is a very, very excellent trope that I love. You never know whether you're gonna draw your pistol and shoot him and take away all of his power, or he's going to enforce his like sheriff against you and take away all of your power. Like you both act upon that different axis. Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's very crazy.
I don't know why I'm bothering with this game. I should just make an Apocalypse World hack like everyone else does. Kyle doesn't think the owl works in Night Witches. I'm calling him out.
Yeah, no, I he has said that to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In so far as you don't think someone. So it's, man, Kyle should be in this chat for sure. Is it that the owl is like a bastion of good and therefore doesn't work, or what is it?
No, I mean I'm gonna misquote. I mean, I feel like I should just wait 10 seconds while Kyle like types out a response.
Yeah, but, Kyle, why doesn't the owl work? Tell us.
But from what I apologize if I misrepresent this, but I think it's to the effect of like the owl has a very different agenda to the rest of the group. Because they're kind of like sitting back in the shadows, observing, plotting their own plans to like get ahead, kind of thing. And I think the other part of it, I think this is a bit that I'm going to get wrong, is the moves don't facilitate that agenda very well.
Interesting. Because, so Kyle's response was, it's because you're trying to leverage a thing the game says women don't have, which is power, right? The owl is about being the higher ranking officer and pushing your power around. And I think Kyle's point is that that have that leverage.
We were just talking about how we're like super good at like the Newlyweds game because we've played so many duets together, and I think we've just proven that theory wrong. So, and it's all my fault. But yeah, and I regretfully didn't have much of a chance to like see Kyle's owl through nor Ari's owl when they played them, but like they're both very interesting characters. The one owl that I've seen played through a campaign like that was clearly not aware of that and played the character very naively and innocently right into the hands of the NKVD, because like that's the only way you can solicit quote like power in that game, because the NKVD are like, yeah, of course, like we'll help you out.
Yeah,
we'll do
we'll
things.
help you.
Like go off and do all these like these like
everyone
missions.
that violates Article 58 for us, please.
Yeah, and I watched that character. Like I think the player like almost verbatim said like, I feel like I keep wandering into the NKVD with like 2 promises and I woke up with 4, and I was like, yes,
Yeah.
that's how it works. So like
Welcome to the
yeah,
NKVD. Yeah.
and I think like I mean of course Carl's right, like Carl's a genius. But yeah, and that was probably a factor of yes, this like female character didn't have the means of the power to like affect those goals. Ergo, they go to a different power structure of the NKVD to affect that. And that did not go super well for them.
Yeah, interesting. I guess I never realized, because the pigeon is the best playbook, and anyone that plays anything other than a pigeon in Night Witches is wrong.
Yeah, the Hawk Adventurer is the way to go. That's where like true Lauren comes out when you're playing the Hawk Adventurer, because it's all impulse and no responsibilities.
Yeah, that's my jam. My favorite part about Pigeon is just you shit talk people in debriefs. It's just the best part.
Yeah, my Hawk Adventure was where my friend I got the nickname No Fucks Lauren, and, and he was like, I was like, I thought this game turns me into like a real asshole. I just don't give any fucks. And he's like, I like No Fucks Lauren. She needs to like come out more often. And I apologize to No Fucks Lauren. I feel like I've been giving her way too many fucks recently.
Yeah, I think you have. I think it's definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
Ryan's on Team Pigeon. So it's me and Ryan versus you and Kyle. Battle Royale. It's going hard.
sounds good.
All right, let me just check. EST. Lauren, it's midnight. What are you doing?
I'm okay.
We're wrapping.
I don't know what I'm doing ever.
Ever. You need. Oh my god, we're going for like 2 hours. So at an hour, I was like,
yeah, I don't know. But I am on Mountain Time, so on Mountain Time it's only 10:30 p.m.
I thought you were on EST. Okay, that's fine.
No, I'm on EST, but my brain is on Mountain Time.
Oh, you're right. Okay. My body is on Mountain Time is definitely my next Tinder bio. So I tried about an hour ago to be like, we'll just wrap up and have like a quiet thing, and then we got talking about consent structures, and then you'll never shut us up about that.
Oh no, never. So, yeah. Sorry.
It's time for a wrap. We're gonna roll this up now, and that's fine. If we want to talk about other stuff that's come out of this, we'll have all the opportunities in the world. I super support that.
Yeah. And I'm done anytime to talk about feminism in gaming. So
that's awesome. I also have you on my list of playtesters and all that sort of stuff. But first, Lauren, in rolling out of this, where can people find you on the internet and the things that you produce in order to support the amazing work that you do?
Okay. I'm on Twitter. My mom follows me and likes my tweets a lot. So I would appreciate more support there, so it's not just my mom telling me that I'm cool. No, I'm kidding. I love my mom. It's just weird when she likes your tweets about hot guys making out.
Oh god, that's so good. So good. What is your Twitter handle, you horrific self-promoter?
No, my Twitter is at the Stray Kiwi.
You have the best Kakapo or Kakapo tweet in the last like 20 years.
Thanks. I love the Kakapo. Is one of like the. I love it. I love the animal. Anyway, sorry. That's my Twitter handle. I post mostly like I don't know shit that I do in my life, and sometimes about games. I do a lot of, as I said, I do like a lot of editing for the Codex zine. So far, the 2 things I've published: A Game of Love, A Final Go, A Game of Love, and Hot Guys Making Out. I feel like Holmes have both been in there. Hopefully, when I get time, more content will go in there. Also, watch the space for so Girl Underground, the one I am starting in collaboration with Jesse. He and I are co-designers in that one. I guess I watch the space because we're hoping to playtest it a shit ton more and then kickstart it. Message shout out to Jesse. He's an angel. And I think those are the main ones. I'm on Google Plus sometimes. I'm really bad at this.
I super need a producer just to wrangle people like you. Like, that's why I need Ryan, the producer, around for sure.
Yeah. But I think that's me.
Awesome.
I so super obvious. Sorry.
If you would like to support Lauren, go onto gauntlet-rpg.com, subscribe to Codex on their Patreon, as she is the editor. If you go on to Good Society, I don't think is in release yet. I think it's just exiting the Kickstarter phase. But if you go to storybrewers.com, you'll be able to find Good Society, which Lauren will have her name in and absolutely deserves your support for. Otherwise, Girl Underground, to be confirmed, the only game that David Bowie's cockbulge definitely belongs in.
Yeah, that and Patrick's Wicked and the Divine.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Boy, I'm sad I missed that.
It's the best.
Lauren, you have been such a blast. Thank you so much for your time, for your brains. I definitely will need to rewatch this to catch everything we spoke about. But I think you've given me just so much to work off. And I think that I've been worrying about a lot of stuff for traditional ensemble games that I don't need to worry about anymore. And I'm really grateful to you for providing that to me. I look forward to involving you in one of the early playtests of Wanted.
Looking forward to it.
And seeing what comes from that.
Thank you so much for A, talking to me, and B, putting up with my hotel quality internet.
It actually held up remarkably well.
Okay. And my rambling. This is like such a delight. We haven't talked in a long time, so I appreciate the chance to chat.
No, I have missed you.
Yeah, and
we'll close this off. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm sorry for.
Yeah. No, I'd like to put a special shout to Kyle for while sitting on a train in Tokyo, just taking the barrage of misquotes and misattributing that happened throughout this episode.
The views that I disclose are my own and are not representative of Kyle. And I appreciate him for letting me talk about our experiences and name dropping him all the time. And I adore him, and he's the best.
He's the best, isn't he? I'll have to get. I see. Here's the thing. I really want to get Kyle on, but I am super intimidated because he is like such a brain, and I'll just be like,
yeah. He's a genius.
He's a genius. He's a genius. Okay, we're going to say goodbye to the team now. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for those that hung around in chat. Interestingly enough, the chat was mostly Philip, Kyle, and Ryan. Most of the people that we were talking shit about. So I'm
awesome. So glad about that. Yeah. I love all of them, and they're and they're all people I've played duets with.
Absolutely. Do you want to do the shitty owl pun closer or shall I?
I did not come prepared.
That's fine. I'll finish it up, and I'm going to be super. It just hurts. It hurts right here every time I do it. But for those of you who joined us, it's been an absolute pleasure. And in going forward in your life and in your designs and in your games, please keep giving a hoot.